Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm back here with Jim DeLisi, president of Fanwood Chemical, and here for another Trade Talk with Jim episode and just update on the trade situation right now. Quite a bit has happened with the new administration, some new developments. So I was wondering if you could just walk us through some of that. Katherine Tai being named the new U.S. trade representative and what the implications are for agrochemicals.
Sure. A lot has happened in the last month to help us better understand how the administration intends to handle trade issues. Interestingly, Katherine Tai was approved by the Senate. I think she may be the first cabinet level member of the Biden administration that was unanimously approved. There was no votes against her confirmation. So it was 98-0 with two people that weren't there. So they were not abstainers or abstentions. They just weren't there. So it was a wonderful vote of confidence in Ms. Tai. I watched her hearing before the Senate Finance Committee, and she clearly is hawkish on trade. One of the things that she said that would have been unbelievable 5 years ago was that the use of tariffs is in the toolbox of the U.S. Trade Rep's office. Prior to President Trump, that would not have been said in the confirmation hearing because nobody really understood it was possible. She focused on a lot of the key elements of the President Biden's agenda: worker rights, environmental rights and justice, global warming, supporting U.S. manufacturing and strong intellectual property protection, strong enforcement of existing trade agreements were some of the things that she discussed in her hearing. She is known to be a China hawk, and so it is clear at this point that the tariff issues with China are not going to change in the short term. Many people had wondered whether the trade relationship with China would be run out of USTR or the Department of State and the White House. That's still not confirmed, but the discussions between the Chinese and the the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor last week imply that the trade relationship with China is going to continue to be rocky for the foreseeable future. I think they were hoping for a cordial and congenial meeting. That's certainly not what they got. The Chinese were very combative, as was the United States, and so some of the things we've been talking about, these 25% tariffs on agrochemicals and formulated agrochemicals, are going to hang around for quite a while, it looks, and so everybody should plan accordingly. But it still remains useful to consider keeping inventories that are not immediately needed for consumption in a bonded warehouse should something change on short notice, though at this point in time it's highly unlikely that that will occur. So it was unfortunate that Ambassador Tai was not approved by the Senate in time to go to Alaska, so she was not there. It would have been better, I guess, if she could have been there, but trade was not high on the agenda for those talks anyway, but it still would have been nice if she could have been there. But since she was not approved, that would have been not appropriate for her to attend. There remains a significant amount of concern about Chinese state-owned enterprises, especially those that are involved in communications, like Huawei. The Europeans have also focused on Chinese state-owned enterprises, which could have an impact on Syngenta still, and Anima, since they're owned by Sinochem and ChemChina. That could have an impact on the ag chemical industry if they decide to take some further action against SOEs. So there's a lot of things to watch for, and the next, I've been saying this before, unfortunately, like a broken record, the next 6 or 8 months are going to be an interesting roller coaster. The other piece of the Chinese tariff situation that's important to mention, we've talked in the past about the lawsuit that was filed by a number of attorneys to claim that the Chinese 301 tariffs that the Trump administration had put into place were illegally done. The Biden administration recently announced that they are going to defend those tariffs. so that the idea that they might just say, oh, well, that was the previous administration's fault and we'll just drop it based on the lawsuit is not going to happen. They are going to defend those suits to the best of their ability. So that's another indication that the Biden administration intends to be strong. The last piece of it is the phase one agreement also had provisions for 2021. It does not have provisions for 2022, and it's highly unlikely at this point in time that there will be a phase two agreement unless something radically softens up the relationship between the United States and China over the next 5 or 6 months.
So then what would 22 mean for, would it just, everything would stay in place? And are the tariffs, is there some kind of schedule that they would increase at all right now, or?
Well, they could, as it stands, China has significant purchase commitments for 2022, which are in excess of 2021, though they did not hit the commitments in 2021, but everybody blamed those on COVID. So there was some understanding of why they fell down. So the 2021 commitments, especially for agricultural commodities, are significant, and they are, from everything I can read, they're buying a lot of agricultural commodities. Whether they'll hit the commitment or not is hard to tell. But as part of that phase one agreement, the United States agreed to a standstill on the tariffs. So that should hold through the end of 2021. But after, on January 1, 2022, if there is no phase two agreement, the so-called tranche 3 tariffs could go to 30%, and the tranche 4A tariffs, which includes dicamba and 2,4-D, which are now 7.5%, could snap back to 15%. And if it really gets rough, the tranche 4B tariffs could go to 15%, and that includes tiny little products like glyphosate, glufosinate, some of the key drivers. So there would be very few ag chemicals that were not subject to tariff if there is no phase two agreement, and more aggressive action is taken on the 1st of January 2022 because of that. Okay.
Do you have any different recommendations for companies right now that you have in the past, or what are those right now?
It remains the same. There's an awful lot of products that can only come from China, but if they're brought in for inventory and not immediate needs, best bet is to keep them in a bonded warehouse or a free trade zone. There are several companies operate free trade zones, but not all. But there's a bonded warehouse at just about every port. It is more expensive to keep materials in a bonded warehouse than a normal warehouse, but it's not 25% more expensive. And so just watch out. Ambassador Tai was well aware of the issues with the exception procedure in her previous position as the Chief Counsel for House Ways and Means Committee Trade Subcommittee. So she understands the frustration that companies were having with the exceptions procedure. The last and only agrochemical exception that expired on 12/31/2020 was paraquat. So right now, all agrochemicals that are on the list, there are no exceptions. It is hoped that she will reopen the exceptions procedure in an open and transparent way, that the filings will be reasonably simple as they were under the previous administration, but the adjudication of those requests will be much more open and transparent. So there will be a clear understanding of why they make the decisions and how they make the decisions and the impact of the decisions on individual products, many of which are exclusively available from China. So we all need to watch out for a notice from USTR that they've reopened the exceptions procedures for the 301 tariffs.
Great. Just shifting topics a little bit here. We received this press release yesterday from some of the top industry groups in the US, including Crop Life America, the Corn Refiners Association, and 25 others. So they sent a letter to Katherine Tai and to Secretary Vilsack, addressing concerns over what they say is the rapid deterioration of the US-Mexico trade relationship. So it calls attention to some alarming, they say, recent developments with regard to food and agriculture trade relationship with Mexico, and urged action to address these challenges. So they, in the letter, it said Mexico is one of America's most important food and agriculture trade partners. NAFTA has yielded strong benefits to both countries, and USMCA promises to build upon those gains. Yet the food and agriculture trade relationship with Mexico has declined markedly, a trend USMCA's implementation has not reversed. We respectfully urge your attention to this important but quickly deteriorating trade relationship. So the leading concerns they highlighted would be the ban on glyphosate and GMO corn, more obstacles to dairy trade and organic export certification requirements, and some other things like a state-sponsored campaign disparaging corn sweeteners from the US. They list quite a few other things. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this, where this is going.
Well, there was a note out of USTR over the last few days that Ambassador Tai either had or was about to have a discussion with her Canadian counterpart, and they were talking about putting together a senior officials meeting on USMCA issues. There's the glyphosate ban, I think, goes back to the middle or early last year. So some of these things have been building up, and now that USTR has a leader and she's assembling her team, there's a chance that they can put together a big meeting and have discussions about all these things. Whereas for the past 3 or 4 months, without leadership, there was no way to advance any of these kinds of things. But there are provisions in the USMCA for this kind of a meeting to occur to discuss issues that arise between the various countries. I've also seen, I think that the dairy issue is probably more related to Canada than Mexico. So there's things that need to be discussed, and the USMCA provides for routine meetings, but they haven't been able to do it because there was no leadership to conduct the gatherings. So
Okay.
I suspect you will see some action there.
Okay. And then just on some of your trade data, the import data from January, and just what have you seen recently regarding those active imports?
Trade data suggests that the ag chemical industry remains with a cloudy picture. If you compare January 2019 to January 21, except for fungicides, which are up almost 50%. Insecticides are flat, and herbicides are basically flat. They're down just a little bit. So no real growth. And when we look at the full year details of 2017 versus 2020, you see significant drops. In the case of insecticides, 2020 was about 60% of 2017. In the case of fungicides and herbicides, was about 2/3. So continued drops over 2017, though 2019 versus 2020. There was, again, fungicides are the outstanding place where imports of formulated materials are up significantly. So fungicides remain a bright spot for imports, where the others are suffering.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Any more details?
And none of these figures would include the impact of the China tariffs, because I always do it net of tariffs.
Okay. Got it.
There are really 2 other things that we should talk about, or 3 other things we should talk about just briefly here. First, all the duty suspensions on agrochemicals and reductions expired on the 31st of December 2020. There is a bill in Congress to reinstitute that, but basically hundreds of active agrochemicals had an exemption from the 6.5% base duties on most products coming into the United States. Those duties are back. Hopefully Congress will pass the bill, reinstitute those special duty provisions. Unlikely to be retroactive. So if you've been paying the extra duty, you're likely not to get the money back, but hopefully sometime in the near future, the duty suspensions will come back. There's broad support for renewing the GSP program, which would have a significant impact on agrochemicals from India. When it gets renewed, it will probably include requirements on environmental and labor provisions. So there may be some things that need to be discussed with India concerning their environmental and labor practices. But I think you can anticipate that GSP will be back within the next 3 months. It will be likely, it has always been retroactive for countries that are current participants. Whether it would be retroactive and what that retroactivity will be for India will depend upon the way the legislation is written. So we have to wait to see that. And the last piece of it is that the UK is pushing hard to complete the US-UK free trade agreement, which the Trump administration had gotten almost to the finish line. If that's going to happen, it needs to be done very quickly, because Congress's ability to pass trade agreements is under a provision called Trade Promotion Authority, which expires at the end of June or July, and there is no indication that that will be extended. So there's a lot going on. Stay tuned, I guess, for the next discussion. And I think I forgot to start. I want to emphasize that it is March 23, 2021. This is to the best of our knowledge and ability to give the update as of this date, and anything said in this presentation can be changed on short notice.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. There is a lot going on, as you said, so stay tuned and we will be back with more in several weeks. So thank you so much.